My name is Luke Porter. This is the presentation over the research I did over the encyclical and the ideas behind it of Gravissimum Educationis, the importance of education. So my thesis that I compiled from my research is that everyone has an inalienable right to education, and the installation for these values begins in the family. But they also need to be nurtured within the church and within the community. So the three parts of my thesis, they all have their own role in the education of everyone within the world, and mostly, so we'll start with the family. So a big part of the family, the parents are the people who must create an atmosphere filled with love and respect for God. And the family is also kind of this idea of the first school of the social virtues that every society needs for every child to grow up and to be within, so they become great people and so that they can be educated. And then you have the church. The church teaches kids to have the knowledge of God from the faith they receive from sacraments, and this also teaches them how to worship God and to love neighbors. And then the church must also help the children who do not attend a Catholic school in moral and religious ways. So it doesn't matter what school you attend, the church is responsible for everyone and their education within the faith and the salvation. And then you have the community. And so the responsibility of education being protected for the youth is entrusted within the community, basically, but those who are in charge of education within the community. So we have the work of education. If it's not in accordance with the parents' wishes or within the common good, then it's the community's job or the civil society to aid them. So over controversy, I went over religion in public schools and how it's obvious that the church, and just how I talked about earlier, that the church is responsible for the faith and education for everyone and the idea of salvation. And the idea that we must evangelize this to everyone. So that can be hard though, because of the controversy over talk of religion in public schools. But we must go over the ideas or the truths that parents have the true liberty in their choice of schools for their children, and that the church teaches that children can learn that faith, they can learn faith even in secular schools. And then I talked about the question of evangelization. And so it went over the idea that in 2003, the U.S. Department of Education kind of revised and wrote this religious expression in public schools, which basically outlined the rights of students in public schools. It goes on to talk about how religious activity may be condoned as they would in secular activities, and students may pray before meals or meet on school grounds for religious activities, but religious harassment and others is not condoned, and compelling others to participate in religious acts to a point are also not allowed. And schools are not allowed to favor or disfavor students based upon their groups or religions. And then we have the relevance of this idea of education and to this very day. So I went to the Common Core of education to talk about the relevance, and so I talked about the family and how important it is to education that you grow up in a proper family, because in the modern family, if it's dysfunctional and not very much communication is happening, then stuff like family estrangement can happen. And physical and emotional distancing is a part of that. And over a period of time, this breaks down relationships and the family begins to be void of God and selfishness starts to come out in these relationships as they only care about themselves. And then this is self-evident in how the church wants a family to be. How I talked about earlier, this atmosphere of love and respect for God needs to be created, and it's this first school of social virtues. So education is dramatically more difficult to be instilled in this relevant modern family situation just because of the lack of communication and dialogue and love between people and the family. And Pope Paul VI was the author, and he wrote this encyclical on October 28th of 1965 with in commitment of the Second Ecumenical Council. And he talked about how important education is in our lives, and how it can't just be the church's job to be only concerned with faith within our lives. It needs to be concerned with every aspect of our lives. And he wrote this in response to the social progress and everyone kind of wanting to be more involved with the activity roles in society. And it was part of Vatican II, and it was supposed to be implicated by Episcopal conferences. So overall, education as a whole, it needs to be inferred with this idea that there needs to be great cooperation and coordination from all schools, no matter Christian, Catholic, public, private, to better mankind and every single one of those academic institutions, even like colleges and universities. And we must all fulfill our roles to the best of our abilities in the communities and in our worlds. Thank you. And these are also the sources that I used. So thank you.